what do we need on the second Exodus?
Chocolate. It's actually quite important for survival value. See, a little bit of chocolate goes a long way for morale.
It's true.
Morale can't be neglected. You know, we think about what's necessary for survival, you know.
Had a rough day. A
Shelter,
chocolate.
fire, food, clean water source.
You just had to put Grandma down because she wasn't pulling her weight.
Right. Oftentimes we don't think about morale blows, you know, and you're going to need something that's going to just, you know, take the edge off. A little bit of chocolate and a little bit of whiskey.
Agreed, yeah. Whiskey is very sustainable. Could also be used to clean wounds.
Clean wounds.
And if you
start
have to
a
do
fire.
any type of surgery on someone, they're going to want some of that for the wound.
Right. Particularly vodka is a great choice. Not necessarily for taste, but for desired effect and for its multiple applications. So, you know, vodka is going to be much more valuable in the greater Exodus than, say, gold bars.
Yeah.
Currency has little value as far as the real what
Medication, too.
yeah, that's going to be the
Well,
currency.
that goes back to spinal stability and your health, making sure that your greatest resource is your body. Because
Right.
you want to be healthy going into this thing, because you're slowly going to deteriorate over time.
It's true. Yeah, the body is the most important resource that you have. If you have a weak body that can't handle any stress, then it's going to give out. And one of the
Well, it's not just about you, it's about the other people you're with. You know, and if you got kids that you need to take care of. And then they have to push you in a little gurney wheelchair thing because
if all of a sudden you go out in the wilderness and you're hypoglycemic because you've never gone a day without food, and you're fainting, falling out, unable to keep up with the pack, protect the pack, or you die of a stroke, or you know, something like that, you know, you're really gonna affect yourself. So it's important to start applying these things now. You know, get your insulin levels under control, get your blood sugar levels regulated to where you can become a healthy fat burner. You're not dependent upon a constant source of sugar to keep you alive.
if you have to stop all the time, start a fire. You know, 'cause a lot of times you can't do fires in the day or setting off smoke. The people will see it, tracking you down. You never know.
Yeah. Fat is an extremely useful survival source for food. You know, if you think about it, how often are we going to come into a source of carbohydrates that really provides us with a lot of calories? Sure, we might find an apple, if we're lucky, a berry here and there. Are we really going to pick the fields for grain in a survival situation? Probably not. Okay, but if you kill an animal...
You have to learn to eat lots of parts of it that we're not used to eating.
That's true too. But you're primarily going to just be getting fat and protein.
I'm still not going to eat the entrails, though.
And a
I
little
can
bit
get
of
down
fat.
with the heart. I had chicken livers once.
Really? 9 calories per gram in fat versus 4 calories per gram in carbohydrates. You know, 1 gram of fat is going to go twice as far as 1 gram of carbs. And you're going to find it much more often in nature. So it makes way more sense that we should be fat dominant species. We should be.
I gotta learn to burn the fat.
Fats. Our society really places high emphasis on carbohydrates as being a healthy food source. Carbohydrates are intended as something that you eat in a time of plenty to make you fat. You know, in the springtime and particularly the summer when the fruits become ripe, that's when you get all that fructose that turns into triglycerides and is stored as fat on the body for survival
Some
mechanisms.
people take a long time to become able to burn the fat and get off the caloric deficit. We don't want that week or a month to be terrible for you. You want to be prepared for it.
Right. You know, in fact, when people start what's called the ketogenic diet, after their first few days in, most people go through a phase called the keto flu. I don't want to be going through the keto flu my first couple weeks into trying to survive the greater exodus. I want my body to already have adapted to fat usage. And
Flush those toxins now.
Right. And what the keto flu basically is a body's inability to utilize fats. It's not used to having a high percentage of fat. It's using a high percentage of carbohydrates. So a person switch over to a extremely high fat and low carb diet with moderate protein levels. Their body's not going to be able to break down that amount of fat and use it as energy. And they're actually going to feel lethargic and tired because most of that fat is not even being digested and utilized. And that's that keto flu that you go through. So go ahead and get the hard part done now. Go through that. Adapt your body to become a fat-burning organism that's efficient. And then you can reintroduce carbohydrates in your diet, but don't lose that. Be able to do short fasts. You don't have to eat breakfast every day. You can train your body that it's okay to delve into the body fat stores and use that as energy. And the more that you do that, the better it gets at doing that.
I was actually thinking about this the other day. So you don't want to. You usually have the fire survive the night with enough coals. But I was thinking maybe I could leave a little kettle or something where the coffee would be nice and warm and ready to go in the morning. Just leave it right by the coals so you don't have to restart it, rekindle it.
Well, that brings up a good survival technique that I learned from a survivalist. I took a training course, and he actually showed us you try to find a flat rock, a large flat rock, and you scoot your coals together the night before, and then you cover it as best as you can with a large flat rock.
Yeah.
And in the morning, they're still hot, or at least warm, enough to where you can put a fresh twig on there, blow on it steadily, and it will then catch the twig on fire, and you can add more fuel to the fire. So it really helps if you're short on fire-making abilities. Like, let's say that you don't have a magnesium spark, you don't have a lighter, you don't have a match. It's so much easier to start with a hotbed of coals that you saved from the night before than it is to try to start a new fire from scratch with a bow and a stick.
You really have no idea what you're going to be doing in this second exodus. You could be at a single campsite for a long time, or you could be moving daily.
That's true. So what would be a scenario in which you would want to move daily versus a scenario in which you would want to...
If you're being hunted and you have to travel at night, that's when the fasting comes into play, because maybe you only have time for one meal a day, because you can only start a fire maybe in shelter at night. No one can see it. No one's going to spot the smoke.
That's true. So there are many uses for a fire, particularly at nighttime. Now, if you're being hunted, obviously you don't want to be lighting up a fire at night and attracting attention to yourself. But if you're not, if it's just a regular scenario where you're just trying to survive, the fire is helpful because not only is it a source for cooking and for warmth, which are important, but also keeps the wildlife away because they're afraid of fire.
It's true.
So it's important that you especially if you've cooked the night before and the smell lingers of that food, first of all, you don't want to leave food out to the best of your ability. And second of all, you want to have somewhat of a fire so that it will actually keep those predators away from your camp. Just a rule of thumb, the fresher the wood and the greener, the more smoke you're going to have. So you really want that dead, dry wood, and you want to avoid
burning the leaves.
Yeah. Leaves, they light fast and burn hot and fast, and then they're out quick. So they're really not a good source for kindling or sustaining a fire. They put off a lot of smoke.
Really like the best scenario, especially if you have a big kill, you're going to be eating all of that pretty much in one night, and your storage container is going to be your body. It's going to be all that high fat. You might go 3-4 days till your next meal. surviving off berries or running type of roots or edible plants. Until that point, you get the next kill. It's kind of how hunters and gatherers did it before. They just got used to running on that fat and protein until the next time they had a meal.
Right. So day one of the Greater Exodus, you want your body ready to do what it needs to do, whether that is to move consistently and travel or to stay in one place. So let's chat a bit about the idea of hunkering down.
I'm excited about the manna, you know.
Okay.
If they had that in the wilderness, it totally makes sense that
Yeah.
we might get some of that.
Is it going to be more like
Those frosted
Lay's potato
flakes.
chips or Frosted Flakes?
I hope both.
Like
I hope
salty
it's like,
or sweet? Or
I hope
is
it's
it
like
gonna
the
be a
mix of both,
selection?
like covered in chocolate.
Nice.
They said they would do different stuff with it. You know? Maybe we can make manna pancakes or manna muffins.
Right.
They want a nice little cast iron pan to do some baking. actually, that's a great point. Like, what are like the top 10 things you could bring with you? What would it be?
Well, that depends. Are you hunkering down or are you on the move?
You know, assuming they were always moving. You know, everything's cyclical. So the only reference we have is looking at what they went through. Not sure they would probably camp for a while, but often they were moving. Sometimes they had to fight the Amalekites, raiding them camp.
So let's go on the premise that we are moving. And the reason I say that is because if you're hunkering down at your home, you've already got shelter. So that's one thing you're not worried about. So if you're making a list of 10
it's not really a
things you
wilderness experience if you're at home, though. Assuming we'll all be called out of the cities.
Well, depends on I guess
Depends
where
on where
you're
you
going,
live. Yeah,
where you live.
There's a house over there.
Right. If you've got a homestead and you're living by yourself on 25 acres, you probably don't want to go camp out a mile down the road. You probably want to stay where you're at.
I always assume there'd be a fellowship, though, and a gathering, and that figured groups become bigger groups. Almost
Right.
like the 12 tribes scattered across the globe, forming slowly over time.
My personal opinion is that God will direct us and He will make it happen, even if we're not fully prepared. But that doesn't mean that it's not a smart thing to prepare. So, community is important because in the high population areas, if this happened tomorrow and I lived in downtown Atlanta, okay, or Denver, I'm gonna want to get out of those high population areas because the food source is going to run out within a matter of hours, maybe a couple days, and then there's going to be looting, there's going to be violence, because people are going to start tapping into their survival instincts and taking in order to live. And so you want to get out of those high population areas, have somewhere to go to, and figure out where you're going to go from there.
Almost like zombie apocalypse
Yeah.
scenario. You don't want to be around more zombies because that's what people are going to turn into. Essentially, it is zombies.
That's true. That's a good point. Yeah, there will be a zombie.
Except they're thinking zombies, which is even more dangerous.
Right. So, making good friendships with your neighbors. Ultimately, if you're not good friends with your neighbors, you want to form a community because there's strength in numbers. One family by themselves can be overcome by a group of raiders, but 12 families is not easily overcome.
12 is a good battle number.
That's right. So, having an idea of a plan of where you're going to go is a good plan.
And Israel always
Who you're
had
going to be with.
a military type of camp layout too. Families in the center. They are right around the center. Protect everyone. and they knew where they were going to be. You're like, you were the south and you were the north. So like no one got confused. So yeah, one of the top 10 things would probably be a compass of some sort. Good idea. Have that there. Pretty lightweight. And I'm just going to throw a cast iron pan in there just because, even though it's heavy, but it can also be used as a blunt object.
Yeah, yeah, it really depends. Cast iron pan's going to be heavy.
You will, those little tiny ones.
Yeah. Something to cook with,
Fry the egg on.
is important. Number one, though.
Cast iron's easy to clean. Pretty non-stick.
Yeah. I would prefer a pot, and here's why.
Boil water in.
You could boil water, or you could collect water with it. There's a lot of multiple uses you could make out of it. And in a survival situation, you really want to focus on the ability to make fire and have access to water and have protection from the elements. So a knife is probably your number one go-to. I would rather have a knife than a compass any day. I mean, I could look up at the sun and see, where's east and determine where I'm going from there.
That's true.
And if you're really good at topography or with just geography, you can figure out, or even astronomy, you can figure out where you are.
You gotta remember they had cloud too.
Yeah.
Pillar of fire during
Right.
the night.
Exodus 2.0, you're gonna want the Air Jordan flops. You're gonna want a good pair of flip-flops for the journey that never wear out. Definitely want to get the upgrade there.
I'd say a solid pair of boots. Yeah.
Air Jesus.
Air
Walk
Jesus.
on water version.
Probably won't go with the New Balances I'm wearing right now.
Socks are actually important.
Yeah, that's one thing I got packed in my bug out bag is a couple nice pairs of wool socks.
Yeah.
They breathe pretty good.
Wool is good because wool is fire repellent to a degree. Like if you have a polyester, something, a spark comes over and touches it and it burns a hole in it. Wool's pretty tough, and it does well with the weather, and it's good against cold. It insulates pretty well, so it's just a good choice all around. So I would say a good pair of wool socks and wool gloves, especially if you're going to be encountering any cold weather.
Gloves, yeah, I need some gloves.
But socks are important because a blister can kill you. Blister can kill you. Not only just because of slowing you down or whatever, but because of infection.
Yeah, feet are very important, and that's what I've learned throughout my life, having injured my feet, not being able to walk on them. No, I wouldn't have lasted a day in greater excess.
So what about the person who always gets their feet pedicured and they're always wearing shoes that feel extremely comfortable and make their feet always, just lazy, versus a person that goes out and walks barefoot in the grass and maybe goes for a jog in some minimalist shoes.
Well, number one is your number one. You gotta take care of yourself. You gotta take care of your feet.
Yeah.
Any extra fat you got on your body, you gotta carry.
So
if your feet are weak and you're not used to traveling on rough terrain, it's gonna be a shock.
What good
and
is
it might be too much of a shock.
What good is the fitness model who's in perfect aesthetic shape, or even who's really strong and can run fast, but they're not tough? They've never been in a situation where their will and their resilience has been tested.
Yeah, you got a lot of different exercise things out there, and the CrossFitters, it's almost like my gut is that they're closer to the idea. A lot of them, the bodies are pretty beat up. But at least they have endurance and strength together. Or if you're just a gym rat pumping all the time, you're not going to have the endurance you need.
Right. Now, survivalists
and spinal stability on top of that is the icing on the cake. You want your spine strong, 'cause you can handle any type of injury. You don't want to be crippled, lower back pain the whole time.
Well, I've heard survivalists say that you want to conserve energy. You don't want to just be walking around, traveling all the time, using all this energy doing stuff. You want to be minimalistic in what you're doing and not waste your time and energy. However, in the Exodus situation, if
They were
God
getting
says
run down
walk,
by chariots at one point. So
Yeah.
sometimes you got to move.
yeah, if God says go, then you go, and He's going to provide a way. So, not everything that's traditional survivalist value is going to apply to the greater Exodus. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like. I mean, for all we know, we're going to fly over to Israel in an airplane.
Sounds good.
But
Doubtful. Not what Baruch Corman was talking about. I think there will be protection, of course, but doesn't mean there's not going to be trial.
do you think that every nation will turn against Israel?
I don't know.
I mean, do you see America as an extension of Israel in some ways?
In some ways I do, yeah.
Yeah. You look at the founding.
If that's the correct statement, either way, you're going to see America fall then. Whether it's internal corruption and it turns on Israel in the last days, or if we get taken out by another superpower before anything even goes down, which is also something I've thought about.
Right.
Red Dawn type scenario, if you ever seen that movie. Not the remake. The remake's not as good.
I have seen both.
Patrick Swayze version.
Yes. Okay, barring a supernatural act, on the surface level, it doesn't appear like anything big could happen to America, like America's destroyed. Because America is the superpower of the world. We're the strongest nation on many levels. So, logically speaking, you wouldn't think, oh, America's just not going to exist.
The bigger you are, the harder you fall.
And so, alright, but some people go to say, well, America's never mentioned in the Bible, so then it must not be in end times. But I'm like, okay, in the ancient Near East, they didn't have a map of the entire world. The entire world to them was the Near East. So when they would say all nations, it was inferred and implied that they were talking about what the known world was to that culture of people, right? They may not have known that people lived in the continent of North America.
Do you believe in a global flood then?
Here's what I believe. I do believe in a global flood, but I also believe it's possible that the writers of that narrative didn't know that there was anything else beyond the ancient Near East that they lived in.
Why would it be relevant?
Right. It wouldn't be relevant to them. But practically speaking, if it's going to cover the entire ancient Near East, it's physically darn well probably going to cover the entire world. That type of a catastrophic event, how could it not? How could it physically happen that way? To me, it would be more of a miracle that there was this giant flood that only covered the Near East and not the rest of the world. It had to be a global event. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So it could be interpreted that, yeah, it's referring to the area they lived in, the entire known world at that time. But by extension, we would understand it to include the entire Earth. Although the writers of that narrative may not have known what the entire Earth looked like, nor had a map of it.
Neither here nor there. Okay.
Right.
Continue.
That's my opinion. I don't know where to continue. Where are we?
Interrupted you with the global flood.
Oh, because we were talking about whether America will exist. And my contention is that, yeah, America's not really mentioned. Maybe it's symbolically referred to in prophecy, maybe. I mean, there's theories about that, but it's definitely not directly mentioned. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist, or never has existed at that time. It just means it wasn't applicable to their worldview. So could Could America be the Egypt, modern day Egypt, where many of the Israelites are kept in a form of captivity, but also protection to a degree? Or
There's Christians all over the world.
yeah, there's Christians all over the world. But as far as prophecy goes, there's only two main areas. Well, I mean, there's more than two, but you look at Israel and America are the hubs of freedom for the Jewish population in the world.
True.
And you got New York and Florida, which are huge populations. Miami area, and then you have Israel. You've had them go into
parts of Europe.
Yeah. But it's like, that's a huge. Millions and millions of Jewish people live here.
If you think about it, before World War II, they were pretty evenly scattered, even existing in Muslim countries, without too much trouble. I mean, they had trouble in like the early 1900s in Russia. That's your Fiddler on the Roof story there.
What if the Greater Exodus was World War II?
That's an interesting concept.
And that there's an even greater Exodus. What if Greater Exodus Part A was World War II and Part B is yet to come?
I mean, there's definitely an exodus back to the land.
Right.
And it could have been, we always think, it's going to be a part of the tribulation. But maybe it's been a slow thing.
Right.
We have not seen any miracle type events either that mirror that.
Oh, I'd say 1948 was pretty miraculous. 6-Day War. Later on, all sorts of
They were already
crazy military victories that can't be explained logically. A lot of it I've forgotten about, but I've read books, detailing the details of those things. It's pretty miraculous, a lot of things that happen.
5 Israeli tanks versus 50 Syrian tanks.
Yeah, like that.
We saw that.
Golan Heights?
Yeah, it was Golan Heights.
So, yeah, I see potential there. You look at Joseph.
I was thinking about Monty Judah's book. He's talking about like Moses and Aaron being similar to the two witnesses at in the Revelation. The same kind of idea. They came from Pharaoh, and that's right before the Greater Exodus, right before the formation of desolation. That's when they're told to flee. That's what I assume the Greater Exodus begins. That's when we go into the wild to seek protection. That's what I've always assumed.
Well, you could also look at it as captivity. The Babylonian and the Persian captivity, and Cyrus allowing the Jews to return to build the walls of the city in Jerusalem. You kind of look at it like, there's a mass exodus into Israel and into the United States around the time of World War II, almost like another version of captivity, but providing protection.
There's something definitely about the people being in the land. It's very important.
Right.
We talk about God's being forced to withdraw because of the sin in the land. So the more God's people go to the land and the temple system is restored, that's stripping away those layers that God has been had to withdraw His presence from us. I want to say forced being away. Right?
Yeah.
It's almost like when they divorced. He didn't almost divorce us. We divorced ourselves. It was more way of doing it.
Well, he said.
That's why I think knowledge is increasing. We're getting closer to understanding that our fathers didn't have, and their fathers didn't have. More of the truth is being revealed, and I think once the temple system is restored, that's when the devil will make his move.
He said, if you create these abominations in my house, you will drive me from the temple. So we literally drove him out of his house because we polluted it. And when the awakening comes back to realize is that we rebuild and we cleanse the house of God, like has happened many times in Scripture, His presence will return. And when His presence returns, it brings blessing to the land. It provides power. And the rest of prophecy of Israel moving into Judea and Samaria and rebuilding the old ruined cities before Mashiach comes, those are things that still need to happen. But this awakening is occurring. I tell you, one of the things that's slowing it and preventing it is Christian anti-Semitism and Christian anti-templeism. Okay, that understand this idea that the temple is contrary to faith or salvation. The temple is really central to it, and if Christians can wake up and understand the difference between the Aaronic priesthood,
because they fear the temple,
and the Melchizedekian priesthood,
because they fear the abomination, so they kind of put those all in one lump sum.
That's a good point. They're afraid, and so they, a lot of Christians think that it's the Jews that are going to screw up by building a temple.
It's like, it won't happen if the temple doesn't appear.
Right.
It's like,
well, first of all, you're not going to prevent prophecy from happening.
Yeah, they don't understand that they're living in exile, I guess. They're waiting for the rapture.
Yeah.
And they just think that I think most, even Christians, believe in a second Exodus. They just think the Jews will go through it. They don't think the Christians will because of replacement theology.
Exactly. In fact, if we don't go through it, I'm a little concerned that we're not included in Israel in the covenant. You know what I'm saying?
That's a good point.
So we should actually have this idea that, we do want to go through it because that means we are His people.
Refined by the fire.
There's only a covenant with Israel, not with Gentiles. So we become Israel through faith in Messiah and entering into
some
covenant.
Some of the parables are pretty haunting, like the 10 virgins. I like to think of it as like the 10 lost tribes, and they were all 10 that knew Yahweh. Mm-hmm. 5 didn't have the oil. 5 didn't have the Ruach, the Spirit. They weren't ready.
And He sends out the wedding invitations, and people decide not to go. So He sends it on the highways and the byways to the poor and everyone else who doesn't have a prideful heart to say, "Oh, I'm too good for that."
Well, Baruch Corman had a great point today. Ask God what you're missing,
right,
or how you're offending Him.
Should probably go eat.
Let's go eat.